and he looked down and the zipper had welded shut. Welcome back to the trail with Mushy the Cowboy Cook. This is not clickbait. It happened to me approximately 40 years ago, and I've got a little story to go with it. Remember my Amazon affiliate link in the description, and with that, let's get into the video. Alright, it was June 15th, 16th, 17th, right in there, 1983. And I'm sure there's a number of you that probably not even born back then. But that was 40 years ago. I was in Boy Scouts, and I just got my guiding country a few months before. I had earned everything for Eagle, and I was about 5 days away from my Eagle Board of Review. And the year before, I had taken a youth training course down at the same camp, which is Camp Reeves, right outside of Carthage, North Carolina. If you're looking on the map of North Carolina, it's about 20 miles northwest of Pinehurst. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Pinehurst, famous for golfing. I was maybe an hour from home, a little over an hour. And then so that year in 1983, I signed up to be on staff, and we had a lot of training for the staff, like every other weekend for about 6 months. The previous Christmas, in between Christmas in 1982, myself and a guy named Jim out of my troop, we went on a 5-day, 50-mile backpacking trip with the council, and it's like about 200 of us made the trip. So a lot had gone on. I was, you could say, in the prime of scouting, and we started out that week with the boys going through the different training courses or classes we were doing. We did we'd sit down, have some book training, and then some practical training out in the field all week long. If you're familiar with Scouts, it's the somewhat equivalent to Wood Badge for adults, except this is the leader training for the boys. Well, that Friday night, after we were going to have a banquet, and then we were going to have a ceremony, a closing ceremony, and had the scout executive come down and speak to us. We had dinner. All the patrol was cooked something in Dutch ovens, and then so we had enough food for everybody. And then right after, it had rained some, and some lightning, some thunder, but not really much, mainly just rain. And I had taken an umbrella that week, and my roommate, my tent mate, had borrowed my umbrella. I was standing in this shelter where we ate at, talking to some guys, and he'd used my umbrella to walk over to a building to get something. And it had been, like I said, it had been raining, but somewhat stopped, just a little bit of sprinkling, and the sun was coming out. And then he walked back over, gave me my umbrella. I was standing at the edge of the shelter, and that's when the lightning hit. It hit a telephone pole, and then it came in the wire, and then at the top of the shelter were outlets all the way around the shelter. And it blew out each of the outlets. It hit another boy. He was 13 years old, and knocked out a piece of concrete, probably that big, size of your hand, out of the floor. And then I was at a third one right on the edge where it came out, and I was holding the umbrella in my left hand, It hit the top of the umbrella, jammed me in the stomach, and then went down. And I fell back, fell outside of the shelter, and kind of ironically, I stepped into a Dutch oven. The food was gone, the lid was off of it, and just hadn't been put back on it, and I stepped right into a Dutch oven as I fell back. Considering 40 years later, I'm doing a YouTube channel where I do a lot of cooking in Dutch ovens. But anyhow, I fell back, hit the ground. At first, I couldn't hear anything, couldn't move anything either. And one guy, he went to reach for me, and then he decided not to, and then he decided to reach out for me anyhow and grabbed me, and they picked me up, took me back into the shelter, and treating me for shock, which raise your legs, and then the one of them said, well, massage his legs. Well, he said, I can't, they're hard as a rock. Well, this time I could feel my arms, could feel my chest, couldn't feel my legs, but my muscles in my legs were very constricted. Now, in the meantime, events like that, you have to have a professional scout, someone who works for the scouting council, and he hopped in his car, which that's the only one we had in the camp. And now, remember, this is back in '83. No cell phones, no nothing like that. He hopped in his car, drove out, drove right past the ranger's house, which he happened to be there. His wife is a nurse, but he didn't even think about that. He drove on over to the other camp, which is Camp Durant, and there were adults and boys there getting ready for summer camp, which would be starting in a week or so. They had come down for their last minute training before the start of summer camp. And he got a few boys hop in the car with him to come back and got them to call for help. And then they came back to have some other boys that had not knowing all the situation with everybody, he just brought some more help over. So while they were doing that, they were, like I said, attending both of us, had called for a EMS to come out, and they took the other boy up to a building, to our medical building, to wait on the ambulances to come, and then they got me. Well, when they put me in the car, and this goes back a long time, they stuck me in a Chrysler K car. If you've ever seen one of those, they're not very wide, but since my legs would not bend, when they put me in the car, I was kind of bent over because I literally was from side to side of the car. And then a boy hopped in, and I had my legs up on his waist, on his lap, and we rode up there. And then as they took me into that building, one ambulance had gotten there, and they were attending to the other boy. And he was somewhat out of it, but he was asking them to take his shoes off, and they had already taken his shoes off. But I think it was because his legs, his muscles were constricted, and he couldn't feel anything. So they took him to the hospital first, and then they took me next. And as soon as I got in the ambulance, the Order of the Arrow chief, he was there. He had come over to help out. They wanted a scout to ride with each scout going to the hospital, so he hopped in and rode with me to the hospital. And the guy and the volunteer, he said, all we heard was there were lightning had hit, and there are 40 of us out here. And he said we didn't know what to expect. In the ambulance, they took my shoes off, immediately pulled my socks off to check to see if my feet were burnt in it anyway, and then I had a wristwatch on my left hand, and he said he didn't have a watch on him, but he said we had checked to see if the lightning had affected my watch, in which it did not. It didn't affect it at all. So we get to the hospital, and they put me in an emergency examination room. And then when the doctor came in, he talking to me, and he said, well, go ahead and take your clothes off. So I reached down for my shorts, and my zipper wouldn't move. And I told the doctor, I said, my zipper won't move. And he looked down, and the zipper had welded shut. So he grabbed the tab and just ripped it, and teeth went everywhere. So it took a couple of hours. They called my parents to come down. Told them I was okay, but need come on down anyhow. So like I said, I was a little over an hour away, and they came on down. And even at first at the hospital, I could not feel my legs, but over time, over probably another 3 hours, the muscles loosened up in my legs, and I could feel my legs again. Other than that, I was fine. I did have a little burn on my hand where I was holding on to the umbrella. Now what it did was, when it hit the umbrella hit my stomach, it ripped my shirt, it ripped my shorts, welded my zipper, burnt my shorts a little bit, burnt my underwear some, burnt hair on the back of my legs a little bit, and burnt the top of my socks. All very minor. And in fact, the next morning, when I got up, I had my parents take me back to camp, because I wanted to go back to camp. We were just going to be packing up, but I was fine. I did look in on there were 2 boys stayed overnight, the other one that was hit, and then one other boy who was having ringing in the ears. And I did hear that throughout the night some boys were brought in, checked out, and then taken back to camp. But 3 of us stayed overnight till in the morning. And then the one that was hit, the next morning when I came by, he was still out of it. And he did end up with a little bit of surgery on his eardrum. It did pop his eardrum. But other than that, as far as I know, he had no other injuries. So we did luck out. Now, when I got in a wheelchair and they were going to wheel me up to my room, the doctor came by and he said, it's a good thing I had the umbrella, because I had braces on at the time. If I didn't have the umbrella, the lightning probably would have hit my braces and probably just knocked my head off. Kind of blunt, but that's kind of a wake-up call too. So that evening I kind of had 2 wake-up calls. One was when I saw my legs in the car, I could see them but not feel them. And then with his comment about how the umbrella saved me. And so, like I said, it was just a kind of a wake-up call. So the next day I go back to camp, and they didn't have the ceremonies the night before, and we just basically packed up and left. But one thing, the staff, we had practiced all week to march into the final closing ceremony, and we were going to march in formation and then line up like we did every morning and every evening for the opening and closing flag raising and flag lowering each day. We were going to march in to the AC/DC. They were popular, well, very popular then, to the song "Another One Bites the Dust," which in the end was kind of ironic, but they still hiked in that morning. They left one spot open for me. They hiked into that song, lined up, and then when I walked in out from the woods down the trail, everyone was quite surprised that I'd come back. And so I went right to my spot and got in line, and then we finished the ceremony. So, you know, things happen. One thing happened that week while we were at camp was back here in Raleigh there's a state park here that a girl was riding her horse a couple of days before we were hit. It was like Tuesday or Wednesday, something like that. She was hit by lightning, and she died on Friday, the night we were hit. So we were very lucky. The stars were aligned for us. And one thing, all the boys out there, you know, helped us out, the ones that were hit. And you know, they were looking out after each other. And I've heard of some other Boy Scout incidents where things go wrong, you know, accidents like that. One of them was out in Colorado probably 10, 12 years ago. And the boys that were not injured immediately jumped into action and took care of everybody else. So that's my story. 40 years later, I'm on YouTube and having a great time cooking, whether it's here at my house, on the trail at a tractor show, or catering for a rodeo company. I've been cooking outdoors since I was 11 years old, and that puts it at about 46 years ago I started cooking. And we actually cooked out of chuck boxes, which is a smaller version of a chuck box on a chuck wagon. So, hope you enjoyed my little story. You never know what's going to happen. Well, I hope you enjoyed as much as you can enjoy a story like that. It did have a happy ending, and I am thankful that everyone came through all right. Hats off to the boys and the adults out there, and the boys that you know, grabbed me, helped me out, helped out the other boys, looking out after one another. And it just shows the true spirit of scouting, that yes, we all have our own goals in scouting and stuff like that, but in the end we are true brothers and willing to help one another out. And like I said in the video, there have been other instances around the world, around the country, of accidents happening amongst scouts. And typically you'll read in the article or hear in the news report about how the scouts jumped right into action, helping one another out through that situation. So again, thanks for all those boys that I went through that training course with. I enjoyed teaching, and 40 years later, I'm still teaching. Now it's cooking outdoors. So that course taught me a lot as far as leadership and teaching people, and I'm hoping that you are getting things out of my channel and wanting to cook outdoors, or if you don't cook outdoors, at least use the recipes and cook them inside. Don't forget my Amazon affiliate link in the bottom, in the description. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Share with friends, like it, and as always, ring the bell and Mushy the Cowboy Cook. We'll see you down the trail.